You know how to turn me on. Oh, you got it going on. Baby, you can make my day.
1, 2.
You know how to turn me on. Oh, you got it going on. Baby, you can make my day. Come on, get down with me. We can dance the night away. Baby, you can make my day. Nothing's gonna stop us now. We can get down anyhow. Come on, baby, make my day. Come on, turn the radio on. Turn it up, the neighbors gone. You can make my day. You know how to turn me on. Oh, you got it going on. Baby, you can make my day. Come on, turn the radio on. Turn it up, the neighbors gone. You can make my day. You can make my day.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you please take your seats as the next stand event is about to begin? Thank you.
Never been so existent. You can't know unless you feel it. Come back, body's aching from the wanting, no waiting. I get this pain when you're leaving. Never felt this before. Never felt this before. Is it written on my back? Yeah. Take it back and then let it go. Let it go. Is it written on my back? Yeah. Take it back and then let it go. Every day is the day that you save me. Light into darkness, cut on the sharpness of your.
Okay, is that okay? Morning, everyone. We're going to talk to you this morning about ESG. It's obviously a big buzz term which has become more and more prevalent and popular, particularly since COVID. So the backstory was that buildings that have been redesigned in the last 2 years are sort of ticking the ESG boxes, but are we doing enough really in the refurb market and for SMEs? There seems to be access to ESG best-in-class buildings in big, large, new build floor plate buildings, but should we be forgetting about the smaller businesses, businesses similar to ours, where there's maybe 30, 40 people, we have an ESG agenda. There is not a lot of options or access for us to get into that space. So I'd like to thank the panel for coming on today. And if everyone could introduce themselves, starting with you, Tanya.
Yeah, I'm Tanya Francis. I'm a partner at CMS in the real estate team based out of the Manchester office.
So I'm Andy Temple from WSP. I'm Senior Operations Director for our property and buildings business.
Good morning, my name's Jane Healey Brown. I work at Arup, where I'm a Director of Planning and our Global Planning Skills Leader.
Hi, I'm Andrea George. I'm Director of Town Centres at Bruntwood.
Well, thank you. What a panel. So we're going to look at what is ESG, what does it mean to each of the panellists? Do we cater for the SME market? Why is it important? Are landlords doing enough to tackle this? And how can we find solutions and pathways for buildings which are already built and not just new builds? So if we'd like just to start with, what does ESG mean to you as a Bruntwood employee?
So Bruntwood's actually a purpose-led company, and our mantra is actually creating thriving cities, thriving places, thriving communities, and actually sustainability and inclusion cut right through to our core. We actually have a purpose-led framework which is made up of environmental sustainability, a fair society, cultural vibrancy and health and well-being. And I guess from a sustainability point of view, for the last 47 years, we've actually been quite sustainable. Who knew? Because we actually refurb buildings as opposed to do new builds in the main. And I just think it's quite interesting at the moment. We've just done a review of all of our buildings in a building efficiency programme where we've evaluated every building. And by, I just have to look at my notes, 2030, we will be able to get the EPC to a B rating. So, yeah, and we also bought a stake in a wind farm.
Really?
So we'll be able to have renewable energy to all of our common parts from there.
Excellent. And Jane, do you have from a corporate level, is there a clear ESG policy that you guys have in place?
Well, I think ESG is something that has been a long-standing core of the way that Arup operates. We are an employee-owned organisation, which is unusual for an international organisation, about 19,000 staff, so it is unusual at that scale. And back in 1970, our founder of Arup handed the ownership of the company to the employees, and at that time made a speech which we refer to as his key speech. And within that, it set out the values of the organisation. And if you look back to those values that he set out in 1970, they absolutely fit with the ESG agenda. He was so ahead of his time. So it included social usefulness. It included what he called total architecture, but you look at that, that's actually sustainability in it pre the language. And then humane organisation, they're 3 of the 6. And so that is absolutely core to how we operate. And I don't think I've interviewed a candidate that hasn't referred to the key speech and the values that that brings as part of why they're interested in coming to work with us. So it's a huge driver of how we operate. But the employee ownership and those values also affect what we do as well. So we do a lot of research with external collaborators. Yesterday, some of you here may have heard us talking around concreting and looking at the collaboration there about driving forward that innovation with environmental purpose. But the final thing I'd say is that also we use it to drive some of our business. So at COP26, we made the commitment that with all our building projects, we would do a whole life carbon assessment, whether or not our client asked for it. And in doing so, we have generated a huge data bank of information about carbon in buildings, which we open source to share with others. So it affects how we operate right through the core, but it isn't a recent thing, it goes back 50 years.
Thank you. And Andy, would you mind giving us your thoughts as to what ESG means specifically to your business?
Yeah, so for WSP, we're obviously a global business, and ESG's an intrinsic part that runs all the way through our business. It runs from our global strategy down into our UK strategy, and then into all the policies that we have. And in the UK, we've committed to halving the carbon that we generate in our both operational and embodied in our designs by 2030. And we're doing very similar to you in measuring all of the carbon that we generate. Then from the S part of ESG, social, we're trying to generate £120 million worth of additional social value. That's on top of the billions that we create through the projects that we work on, but 120 million of additional social value through our operations in the next 3 years. So we've measured last year, we've generated just around about 40 million, so we're on track with that, but that's a good part. And then in terms of the governance piece, we try and hold ourselves to account in everything that we do, and that runs through all of our I&D policies and the way we recruit people and the way we look after our staff.
Thank you. Tanya?
So as a law firm, we have a really strong practice in the ESG sector, and we've got specialists that advise our clients on their expectations and corporate requirements and responsibilities. So we've got that aspect of knowing what the regulations are and what the change and shift in mood is. But we also then take that into our business as well. So as an occupier, we really have ESG at the centre of our core policies and principles. All of our buildings in the UK are supplied through renewable energy. All our paper is recycled, so all our printing is recycled paper. We even have a partnership with a company where all of our coffee beans are reused and transferred into biofuel. So it's really something that we take entirely seriously, and it's a central core of our policies.
Thank you. So I've never experienced a trend in property move so quickly, and the market's really got behind it, whether it's an occupier, an investor, a developer. Andrew, what do you think the key reasons are, the drivers for this sort of surge towards a sustainable conscience, if you like?
Well, I think in terms of that drive, you've got the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals that we all need to meet, and it's important to remember that climate is only one of them. But in terms of kind of the building stock that we've got, it's important to remember that 50% of the buildings that are here now will still be in use in 2050. So that refurbishment piece is key. And then when you look at I think it's by 2025, it's got to be an EPC of C. 2030, it's an EPC of B. That piece around reuse and refurbishment is going to become more and more to the fore. The first wave of new buildings with good ESG credentials, they are really from large developers, large developments, but I think that's quickly trickling down, and what we're going to see is, as planning policy changes, that will drive ESG more into every part of what we do.
Yeah. We're definitely seeing our occupier clients value ESG in terms of helping them retain, attract new talent. It's helping them from a value perspective if they're raising investment, and also their customers. People want to buy off and work with people that do have a nod to ESG. So, have you found your customers?
Yeah.
Bruntwood customers, not tenants.
Yes.
What have you got any data to share or anything like feedback from them?
Yeah, so we did a sustainability survey across all of our customers, looking at 7 domains. So it was about emissions, energy waste, sustainable materials, sustainable transport, water, green spaces and biodiversity. And it was the emissions, energy and waste that the customers were asking most questions about, and therefore we've really taken that on board and we're really focusing on that. And we look to really add value for our customers, and we do that in 3 ways. The first way is around infrastructure. So we give our customers the access to sustainability data and show how we can improve the efficiency of their buildings. We communicate that to them so they can help change their behaviours, which both suits them, and we keep communicating with our customers about what we're doing. And thirdly, around products and initiatives. So we create new opportunities to support customers on their sustainability journey.
Yeah, I think that transparency is really important, and giving your customers the data is really helpful.
Yeah.
Tanya, from an occupier's perspective, what would you find useful from a landlord?
I think the things that Andrea's already mentioned really is about that transparency and data information. So obviously as an occupier, what we're interested in is ensuring that we can provide the best space for our employees so that we can attract and retain the right talent, and having the flexibility within the space to be able to make changes to do that is obviously important. And that's not just necessarily on the E side of things, but also on the S side as well. So creating nice well-being areas, collaboration spaces, access to open spaces if that's available. All of that, and really healthy buildings as well. So looking at what the HVAC system does and whether that's and the lighting, whether that's a nice environment to be in. And then we've got our own policies and reporting that we need to do, and transparency in terms of our emissions and carbon footprint. So being able to work with the landlord to get that information from you so that we can then obviously comply with our own obligations is really important.
Yeah, great.
Jane, Andy, what do you think? Can landlords be doing more? Are we doing enough at the moment?
I think landlords will need to do more. I think what you'll see with neighbours, once we start getting more and more buildings that are neighbours accredited, that's really looking at the energy usage intensity. And it's about measuring it year on year and keeping to try and limit and reduce the amount of energy that we're using in our buildings. And it's important, I think, going back to your point, Will, about smaller tenants as well. The landlords need to give them the right advice to help them meet those credentials. You know, things like controlling their lighting. You know, 40% of your energy use is out of hours. So lighting, putting your servers in the cloud, all of those things help to reduce your carbon footprint and your overall kind of energy usage.
Thank you. I think my response is, you talked about should we be doing more. I think actually think about it as how can we be more impactful rather than doing more. And we advise clients on some of their ESG strategies.
Yep.
And it's about how to be more impactful. And there's a number of sort of learnings from that about how that can be achieved. And particularly when you're talking about sort of the engagement with SMEs, it comes as a thread through that. So getting buy-in is really critical. Getting buy-in for the top and delivering the ESG agenda. But actually getting buy-in from the supply chain can be even more impactful. And particularly when you're bringing SMEs with you, that's really helpful. Also making sure that we've got really informed decision making, which goes back to sort of the data point that we've talked about, and the carbon life cycle work that we're doing is giving huge amount of data that's informing decision making, and then right down to a landlord customer level. But again, how do we get some of the right information and data about the social side, the communities? And again, that's where working with SMEs as partnering. They're often closer to some of those communities to know what the social requirements are. And then I'd say what's really important is actually just making sure you've got an inspiring culture that is happy to take small steps. It's like so much where we want transformation. Don't go out for the big thing. Don't think we've got to do more. Think actually what are the individual steps we can make on that journey to make a difference. And selecting the right partners to go with you is really important. And that's where I think large organisations and SMEs working in partnership has that impact.
Thank you. Yeah, and you both mentioned accreditations. Over the last 2 years, there's been that many different accreditations. It's one of the challenges is, what are the best ones? Which ones should we aspire to achieve? I think it's impossible to hit all of these new accreditations that have come out. And the other thing is, are they relevant to the refurbished market, or are they all sort of fixed and being built around new developments? Don't know if anyone's got a view on that. What is the right accreditation? And are they suitable for the refurb?
Not sure I know the answer to which is the right accreditation, but in terms of what we've seen, I think it's exactly that point, Will. So we've just moved in, relocated two teams, so our Warsaw office and also the Sheffield office. And in both of those situations, we got the greenest buildings we could get. So the Warsaw office is BREEAM and LED accredited. And the Sheffield office that we moved into, it was also the greenest office in Sheffield at that time, and that was just last year. Whereas our Manchester office has just been refurbed, so we weren't able to get the same level of accreditation there. It's certified, BREEAM certified, but it's not accredited, and I think you've got constraints with the structure of the building, the materials that's already been incorporated there. So I do think there is a difference, and I guess it comes back to that point of strive to get the best of what you can do within the building that you've got.
Yep, thank you. Andy?
I think to add on to that, you know, neighbours is obviously one of the main ones that we're talking about at the moment, but it's also worth considering some of the broader, more holistic accreditations that are out there. So WELL, Fit Well, and actually a new one that's starting to come across from the US is the Living Building Challenge. I don't know whether anyone's heard much about that yet, but that's really an accreditation that is looking at a new way of assessing buildings to try and make sure they give more than they take.
Yeah.
So there's a net gain by that development.
Thank you. And Tanya, you mentioned the new office. Mm-hmm. Is there anything special, anything new in there?
Oh, lots of special things in there. How did you know? So yeah, I mean, we're very fortunate that we've got a terrace anyway. So we're refurbing the terrace so that will have a really nice sort of outdoor space for the team to go to. There's biophilia. I think that's the right word, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we've got a living wall, which is being installed in the building, and just the space that has been created within the same floor plate is just really remarkable in terms of the differences that it's made to the building and the way that people are working and the feel that they have about coming back into the office. And in terms of that, trying to shift people back into the office after the pandemic and the new way of hybrid working, it really has made a huge difference in terms of well-being for the team. So that's been really fantastic. But yeah, I think other than that, we just did a lot of reporting. So you mentioned earlier about the carbon reports and making sure that those are all delivered, and everything was reused, recycled, donated. So it's been a really healthy move, I think.
Thank you. And Andrea, as one of the biggest landlords of refurb buildings in the city,
Yeah.
Is there any prime examples of what you're bringing forward, what you're doing new?
Yeah, so we've recently bought Pall Mall in Manchester on King Street. It's a historical building, it's Grade 2 listed. And so from a sustainability point of view, it wasn't a great starting point. So we've had to really sort of get under the skin of it to understand how can we make a heritage building with all its character, but sustainable. And that sort of followed right through from that inception, even down to the fit out. You know, we thought about the circular economy. We wanted to create Bruntwood Works' sort of most sustainable serviced office space. So things that we've done, for example, might be including timber partitions, individually metered suites. So, you know, so again, that, you know, the customers can really understand how they are using the building and you know, what their responsibility is also. But in actual fact, in terms of our marketing, that is aimed at the consciously minded. So we want our customers to come into the building to have the same brand alignment, if you like, the same goals that we're trying to achieve. So that's from a refurbished point of view. New build, Evo, which is our first net zero carbon building that will be built. It's a timber structure, and we're really, really excited to see that. And we're very much about collaboration, so sharing the information that we have with other landlords, with customers, with consultants, so that we can all learn from one another.
And Tanya, have you seen the sort of the green lease clause